Since the death of George Floyd, we have seen a triumph of virtue signalling. This is the practice of individuals making public gestures that show how fair, equitable and high-minded they are, or alternatively declaring their opposition to one of society's many ills without actually effecting any genuine change as a result. It is one of the enduring products of the selfie culture in which we now live that political issues can be so easily utilised for the promotion of the ego. With the help of technology, all one now needs to do, in order to be holier than thou, is create a Facebook post, tweet the appropriate hashtag, or upload a picture to Instagram which publicly announces one's principled and unconditional opposition to racism in all of its forms. There is no need for context or an investigation of the facts. One need not know that more people are killed by lightning strikes in the USA each year than the number of unarmed African Americans that are shot dead by police. The respective numbers for 2019 being 14 killed by police versus 20 by lightning. To make a post about how opposed you are to police brutality in the UK, one need not know, additionally, that in the UK a total of 13 black people have died in police custody over the entirety of the last decade. What's more, an official investigation into deaths in police custody has revealed that only 10% of which can be attributed to any form of police violence, with the vast majority being a result of drug overdoses. In fact, one need not know either that black people in the UK are actually less likely to die in police custody as a percentage of those detained compared to the white majority. The purpose of virtue signalling is not about engaging with the facts. Instead, it is about promoting one's outstanding qualities to the world at large, and to let everybody know that when it comes to the great questions of one's abstract values, you are on the right side of history and can be relied upon to fire off a volley of messages into cyberspace whenever the need might arise. This is because, after all, you are fundamentally one of the good people. And would anyone also out of interest like to view your holiday pictures from Corfu, or a few snaps from a ski trip you took to the Alps, or alternatively a picture of one of the well-known landmarks of the world that has greatly benefited from the addition of your face next to it in the photo? Such indeed might be the complaints of a grumpy old man, lamenting the rise of social media and discarding any of its many benefits, because it's just too much fun to complain instead about how wonderful things used to be in the good old days. However, one of the most troubling aspects of all of this is the way in which a protest movement has been allowed to arise within the UK without any tangible demands or objectives. The demand to end racism in the UK on an abstract level is indeed noble, but what this actually means in practice is anyone's guess. If one wants to rationally assess any protest movement, then the following questions need to be asked. What specifically is the problem? How do we measure it? What changes need to be brought about in order to solve it? And when will we know that the job is done? Or even if things are getting better, or alternatively, if they're getting worse. Despite almost saturation coverage of Black Lives Matter protests, as well as interviews given to anti-racism activists, precious few answers have been forthcoming to any of these questions, and a depressingly small number of journalists have been prepared to ask them. If the movement doesn't have a set of realistic aims, then it becomes a populist exercise of anger for its own sake, a real-life version of George Orwell's 2 Minutes of Hate. An important problem for the movement is, as I've tried to demonstrate in several of my recent videos, is that there is very little evidence that the UK is genuinely assailed by the issues of systemic or institutional racism. And as already mentioned in this video, the claim that police brutality in the UK is somehow equivalent to that of the USA is nothing short of an absurdity. There are few inequalities in the UK that can credibly be demonstrated to be the result of racism, and there are almost no examples of social attitudes and bigotry that have not undergone substantial improvement. The only thing worse than having no demands or solutions is having impossible ones. If one goes to the Black Lives Matter UK GoFundMe page, then the unhinged nature of their demands are there for all to see. The movement proclaims itself to be dedicated to no less than the destruction of capitalism, imperialism, and the patriarchy, as well as to the abolition of the UK police force. If there is no basis for serious dialogue with the movement, or grounds for compromise, then it can only be a force for division in British society. Young people of all ethnicities will and are being told that they live in a racist country, which has no tangible or reasonable way of extricating itself from such an accusation, except apparently by pursuing the reckless and madcap idea of dismantling its police force. Therefore, what these growing tides of virtue signalling are meant to achieve is quite puzzling, whereas the damage they may do is somewhat more obvious. A tangible example of this can be seen in the growing trend known as taking the knee. Introduced by American NFL players, the practice of kneeling during the American national anthem has caused a great amount of discord in the USA. We can only hope that the fashion of taking the knee will have come and gone before England's next international sporting fixtures, lest similar divisions be replicated here in the UK. This is because a national anthem is meant to be a symbol of national unity, in which we are all invited to take part in order to show and act out the bonds that bind us as a nation. Whatever political differences we might harbour against each other as individuals, we know that through our national institutions we can work to try and find equitable and democratic solutions to them. The anthem, much like our national statues and monuments, is meant to symbolise our collective identity as a people and as a nation. It is this identity that forms a bond of trust between us, that allows us to facilitate the peaceful transition of political power between different governments, different political parties, in the secure knowledge that whoever is in power ultimately represents the British people. All governments are first and foremost British governments, and therefore they are also first and foremost our government. It is a trust and sense of unity that also underlies our willingness to transfer wealth from rich to poor within our own country, to treat the fight against coronavirus as a national struggle rather than an individual one, and in the past, our ability to sacrifice life in defence of our collective island home. In terms of sport, the anthem reminds us that we share a connection and a common purpose with the players on the pitch, even though we don't know them personally or have much in common with them otherwise. We dissent from these symbols of national unity at our peril. If players continue to take the knee, and even decide to copy American sports stars, and use it during international fixtures to disrupt the national anthem, then a question has to be asked to which seemingly there is no reasonable answer. What realistically has to be done in order to get those same players to respect the national anthem once again? What has to be done once somebody has taken the knee to get them to stand up straight once again? What actually has to change, and what specific goals have to be met in order for us to return to a world in which nobody feels inclined to take the knee or to play football with the slogan Black Lives Matter across their back instead of their surname? As I've already said, the answer isn't at all obvious, and as such, unless the protests we are experiencing week in and week out start to rationalise their aims, then we are only likely to see a lot more division and unrest before we can start to identify any positive outcomes